be on your best behavior now because you're being recorded. Just kidding. I mean, not kidding.
Hi, everyone. I was having some computer issues, but I'm here now. It's good to see everyone. Wow, it's so many wonderful faces here and names. I'm just gonna pull up something and then we can get started. Drew, are we waiting until 12:35 to get started?
Sure, why not? Yeah.
Okay.
For a few more minutes.
So everybody grab a water or coffee or tea or anything if you need a little snack, because we have a lot to get through. All very interesting stuff though, which is really exciting. It's almost hard for me to believe that we're going to have this many stuttering groundbreakers talk in one event. I can't really imagine how we can fit it into a time slot, but we plan to. Adam asked if you should have read the book first. I don't think you have to have read the book. If you haven't read the book, this will be a perfect synopsis of the book. And hopefully you'll want to read it in its entirety afterwards. So I think I'm going to get started. So welcome everybody to our Friends Speaker series, organized by Drew and Karen and Lee. And this one is called Challenging Stuttering Stereotypes. And it's featuring authors from the book. I'm sure it's backwards on your screen, but Stammering Pride and Prejudice, Difference, Not Defect, which was compiled by Patrick Campbell, who we have here, Christopher Constantino, who we also have here.
I'm here. I'm just eating a sandwich, so I'll put the video back on when I'm done.
Perfect. And Sam Simpson, who I believe we also have here. So the format of this talk will be that we have 8 authors here. To read wrote a chapter in the book, and we're going to have each of them have about 5 minutes to speak, where they can either read a selection from their chapter, offer any reflection, or share an idea, or all 3. And then after each author speaks, we'll have about 5-ish minutes of Q&A on what they shared. We do realize that that's not very much time, and that things might be a little flexible, and one author might sort of bleed into the next in a discussion, and that's fine. And we'll have it broken up with an intermission, with a 10-minute break in the middle. And then after that, we'll have some kind of open Q&A and our now announcing friends winter and holiday events. Okay, so we're going to start with, for the purpose of trying to fit a lot of interesting discussion into the time, I'm not going to read a bio on each person, because I think that most of us who are here know who these people are, and we'd rather hear from them than hear me kind of recite their credentials. So we're going to start with Erin Schick, who has a chapter in the book called Honest Speech. And welcome to the event, Erin, and thank you for being here.
Wait, Erin, just before you start, I just want to let everyone know, if you do have questions or comments, we obviously are going to have that 5 minutes after the fact. So if you want to either raise your hand within Zoom, and then during that 5 minutes, we can sort of call on you and you can ask your question. Or if you would prefer to write a question into the chat, or if you would like to write a question either directly to me, or to Roisin or to Dhruv, then during those 5 minutes, we can then make sure that your cool question gets addressed to. All right, so sorry, Erin.
So my chapter is actually a poem. It's titled Honest Speech. The barn owl communicates with mates and offspring using a complex system of hissing, screeching, squawking, and facial muscle manipulation. Survival is dependent on creating a voice so unique it can be recognized by loved ones in an instant. I argue the cause of my stutter is not neurologic. It's got to be something deeper, something desperate to be remembered. My mouth shines syllables till they sparkle, till my voice is the only one like it. This is not a speech impediment. My voice is an instrument, my stutter its greatest symphony, my speech composed by God. I buy 3 grapefruit and I stutter. I study sociology and I stutter. I like tzatziki and I stutter. The staccato of repetition is an unpredictable percussion. The struggle for every syllable a reminder I have not always had this voice, this stage, a gift of spotlights. It seems there is a new kind of privilege here in being understood the first time, in breath, calm and measured, stripping speech of nuance, in passing as fluent to spare someone else embarrassment. For too long, I have been afraid of my own name, the word invented only to describe me. I have let it sit heavy in my throat, a tool of betrayal. I introduce myself and I stutter. I am a poet and I stutter. I call my parents and I stutter. I love you and I stutter. I love myself and I stutter. The stuttering is the most honest part of me. It is the only thing that never lies. It is how I know I still have a voice. I'm still being heard. I am still here. When I stutter, I am speaking my own language fluently. When I sound like this, I know my loved ones can find me. This is what I sound like when I speak for myself. This is what I sound like. This is what I sound like. I'd like to say it's an honor to have this poem included in this book. But for me, I think of this piece as kind of a time capsule of my own life. I wrote it in 2014 when I was 21, and for most of my life up to that point, I didn't know anyone else who sounded like me. I didn't know why I spoke the way I did. And I saw my stutter as kind of at best an embarrassment, and at worst moral failing. And in college, first I was introduced to the field of disability studies and the social model of disability. And then a few months later that same year to the local stuttering community in Portland where I lived. And that was a catalyst for a few years of kind of reckoning with identity that that sea change is what's became the perspective of this poem. And it was just a coincidence of timing that at that moment I had the platform of the National Poetry Slam to kind of be able to quite publicly declare that, you know, I am no longer going to be internalizing the way other people feel about how I sound. And in looking back, I can forget that I haven't always felt this way. I can forget how much work it took to get to that place, and also that it's an identity that fits me quite well now. But when I first wrote this piece, when I first started performing it, it was kind of a confidence and an identity I hadn't quite grown all the way into yet. And so it's particularly meaningful to me to have that specific moment of my life documented, both in this piece and then as well in this anthology.
Thank you, Erin. I don't see any questions in the chat yet. Is there anybody who has any questions or thoughts? And Karen, if you see the hands raised and I don't.
Yeah, I don't see any hand raised, but I did get one from Nahina G. So, you know, if you want to read it and you can jump in, otherwise I can just share what you had asked.
I can go ahead and ask.
Okay,
Erin,
great.
One of the things that's stuck out about your poem that we don't talk a whole lot about in the stuttering community is spirituality and stuttering. And you just touched on it a teeny tiny bit, but I was like, oh, I never hear about that. Do you have some additional thoughts about that?
Yeah, it is interesting to me the ways that like the intersections of faith communities and disability communities, sometimes it works and sometimes it's very, very messy. And I have always, you know, in my faith practice and faith expression understood my speech and my other disabilities as, you know, a core part of who I am, and that's, you know, that I am bringing my whole self to all of my communities. But it is a particularly abrasive idea to some people in some spaces to say that like I am embracing all of the parts of me as part of me, as, you know, that not only do I not see this as something I should be ashamed of, but that it is an inherent part of myself.
We have a few more questions and I kind of want to go on with all of them, but we also have some time constraints. So I'm going to say thank you so much. And there are some questions in the chat. So if you feel like you want to reply in the chat, Erin, please do. Yeah. So next is Joshua St. Pierre. And he's talking about his chapter called Misfits in meaning.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me here. Well, I have two of my faces on my own screen now. That's much Josh, I think. So when I was invited to come and speak, I spent a bit of time trying to like pick out a passage that I could possibly say in 5 minutes that would possibly encapsulate anything I wanted to talk about. And I quickly came to the point that I just don't want to read. I like stuttering, but I don't like stuttering and reading. Okay, that's a different conversation. So I just want to reflect a bit on this chapter, I guess. So I wrote this chapter a few years ago now. It's called an Introduction to Stuttering and Disability Theory, Misfits, um, 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 in meaning. And the chapter lays out basically three different models or ways of understanding what disability inherently is. So it starts with the medical model that sees the stuttering body as defective in some way, and the body is what has to be changed. And then I lay out the social model, and then I kind of like tease out some problems with this social model of disability too, and say, hey, like perhaps we shouldn't be wanting to put all of our eggs in this basket. And so I wrote this chapter, and the lovely editors kept on saying, okay, this is good, but like, but why do we care about this? I guess is actually kind of what it came down to. Theory is boring, which kind of like hurts my heart a bit because I'm a theorist by training and by trade now. But they asked me to reflect a bit about like why is this important to me, and so I spent some time thinking about like, well, why is these other ways of understanding what stuttering is and what disability is important to me, and so I guess that's just what I want to reflect for a bit. And I realized that like this wasn't just an academic thing, but that understanding what stuttering fundamentally is reshaped my life in a lot of ways. And I think for me at least, shame is an important part of that story. And so when disability is a problem that's located with individual bodies, when my stuttering body was defective and was told that it was defective in all sorts of ways, like every day, it changes the way that I related to myself and to my stuttering. And shame, I think, was something that was a core part of who I was and how I understood myself. And there was a period all of a sudden when I just started grad school. There was an event that happened where I was stuttering with someone, and I was trying to be understood, and I realized that realizing that this person hadn't put in any effort at all to hear me and hear what I was doing, and they just said, huh? And so I like stuttered again, and I went through the whole thing again, and like just like trying to be understood, and again it was just like a huh, and I realized at that point that the shame and the anger that I felt at myself for my entire life up to that point, every time I stutter, and that happened, it was my fault in some direct or indirect way. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I wasn't the problem here, and that this thing we call a stutter is an inherently shared thing between people. and that was like a crack for me, like that opened up just an entire new world of thinking what was possible. And over time, I came to realize that the problem wasn't a defective body that didn't that had to be brought back in line with the system. The problem was there was the broken system that had to be changed. And so there's these ideals of fluent speech that shape what voices can be heard and what voices can even be recognized as a voice. And so the transition for me, at least, in like thinking more critically about this complicated thing called stuttering is that the stuttering body has gone from just being a simple object of shame and an object of expert authority, like for SLP, to the stuttering body becoming an important resource for all kinds of things, including knowledge, identity, solidarity, and even political action. And so I think cutting against shame and turning it into something else is one of the powerful things that theory and thinking about disability in these ways can do.
Thank you, Josh. So many interesting thoughts to unpack there. Karen, have you found any questions in the chat?
There haven't been any specific questions, just a lot of
yeah.
A whole lot of thought and praise for both the Erin and Joshua.
Yes, you guys really kind of busted open this stuttering discourse in a way that I think challenged a lot of people, but really moved, in my opinion, our community forward to be more bold and, you know, explore ideas that might not be quote unquote safe. And I think everybody really appreciates it. Christopher Harshaw.
Questions now, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand. I couldn't quite find that.
Same, because I said we should do that, and then I tried to do it, and I couldn't. So.
I know I've done it once. I know it's possible, but anyways, I guess I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more, Josh, about some of your critiques of the social model. So I'm only vaguely familiar with the social model, like in contrast to the medical one, and I'm wondering if you could speak more on your critiques of the social model a bit there.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. I mean, I should also do a shameless plug and say, read my chapter. And buy the book. I'm sure Patrick is saying. But yeah, so how do I say this? So this social model is really interesting because it's oftentimes called the British social model because that's where it started, and that's where it has like a strong hold. So it has its own history to it that is interesting in itself. But the social model, it makes a firm distinction between a disability and impairment, and says that disability is the social oppression that is caused because of our impairment. So in some ways, the British model just relabels disability impairment, and it doesn't really have a whole lot to say about what impairment is, right? And so, and one of their problems is in the social model, disability is an inherently negative thing because it's an oppression that a group of people experience. So the very idea of disability pride or like identity becomes like hard to think about when disability out of the gate is a negative thing.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next chapter. And again, I encourage you all to read the book, because I know a lot of this is kind of, this could be a 2-hour talk, each chapter in itself. But thank you, Josh, for your thoughts and all of your work. The next speaker is one of my good friends, Emma Alpern, and she's going to be reflecting on or reading from her chapter, Why Stutter More?
Yes, hi everybody. It's great to see you all, and to hear that poem live was really cool. I am going to read some of my chapter. I think it'll be about 5 minutes, but I'm going to try and keep an eye on the time. Okay. So why stutter more? Stutterers want to not stutter, but they also want to stutter. What is this second desire? Why do our minds, our mouths keep returning to stuttered speech? And can we find pleasure in it since we keep wanting it despite ourselves? Can we even start to want to stutter more? At a bar, I lean toward the bartender to order a drink and stutter when I say it. Hi, how are you? Can I have a blue moon? I turn to my friend and say how good it felt to stutter like that in a one-off interaction with that kind of a bounce. I'm surprised because I usually don't notice the pleasures of stuttering, but there it is, my voice. Part of it is physical, the exhilaration of stuttering, that little loss of control that resolves itself so beautifully sometimes. I'm falling through the air for an instant, then catching the ground again, like Fred Astaire pretending to trip when he dances. Part of it is about hearing my voice and knowing others hear it too, the special stuttered fluency that belongs just to me and other stutterers. When I am fluent like non-stuttering people, I am passing, and I know it could end at any second. When I am fluent and stuttering, I am speaking as myself. Part of it is about personal history. Stuttering marks a move away from fear and shame. After years of covert stuttering, every open stutter is a hard-won victory that fills me with a feeling of pride. And part of it is about language. When I stutter, I'm watching with curiosity the way my listener reacts, confused for an instant, and thinking about how delicate all our conversations are, how sensitive to any pause or interruption. Stuttering may give us special insight into language by breaking it open and exposing its seams. To a stutterer, spoken words carry a dimension of meaning that's inaccessible to fluent speakers. This dimension is a site of anguish, anxiety, and labor, whether that means speech therapy techniques or secondary behaviors. But it can also be a place for curiosity, insight, and social connection. I'm just gonna skip to the end, I think. Stuttering therapy that shows us how to shape our words fluently or be successful communicators will never help us will never help us access the underside of language that stuttering can reveal. Stutterers experience a uniquely embodied and passionate version of speech, but we are not usually equipped to observe it with curiosity. Rather, when we seek help, we are given ways to tamp down the strangeness of stuttering. It's essential that speech pathologists understand what a language looks like to stutterers. They should do so not only so that they can help stutterers, but also because stuttering is rich with meaning in its own right and is worth looking at, not just normalizing. Maybe by privileging the atmospheric power of the stutter, we can resist what we've been taught to value about talking: efficiency, cleanness, and transaction. Stuttering more suggests another set of speaking values: passion, disobedience, and curiosity. So yeah, I have been so inspired by so many of you in this Zoom call. I feel like a lot of these ideas came out of conversations and things I've read with and by all of you. So it's really nice to be here. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Emma. I love those words that you choose. I'm trying to find the questions in the chat, and I'm not sure if everyone can do the hand raising. So if anybody has a question or a comment, you can always just unmute and just talk, or you can put your name in the chat. Ron Salazar, you can unmute and talk.
Hello, my name is Ron, and I am a 64-year-old stutterer. And my stuttering dissipated about 90% as I grew into who I am. And so it's an interesting to hear about people thinking stuttering in a positive way, because my stuttering went away before I started thinking of myself as positive, right? So I never really had to look through or work through the shame that I have of stuttering. So can you speak a little bit to the positive aspect of the positive feelings of stuttering?
I mean, I think that for me, it's been interesting to stutter with other stutterers and to kind of like get like interested in this way of speaking from kind of a remove, you know. I when I came to the stuttering community, it was like kind of all very painful. Speaking in general was something I didn't enjoy, you know, conversation I didn't enjoy, and kind of like experiencing the physical sensation of stuttering is something not inherently negative has been helpful. I go into this a little bit in my chapter too, but I don't want to suggest that like stuttering isn't uncomfortable, painful, you know, stigmatized, all these other things too. And I think that's a part of it, and maybe it's a part of the experience that we can't ignore. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
John Moore.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please, Gershine.
John Moore left a question in the chat, Emma. He said, I found the following line in your essay paradoxically intoxicating, quote unquote, stutterers in some way become experts at speaking. Can you please elaborate on that line?
yeah, I mean, I would also be curious what everybody else, if you all relate to this, but I think for me, especially when I was more covert about stuttering, I felt like I had like a map of the conversations that I was in, and I was negotiating them to such a like detailed level. I think like our, you know, like our experience of conversations is more complicated, because I think we're not only dealing with trying to say what we want to say, but also like this other physical level of speaking that comes with stuttering, and negotiating our way through that. You know, I think we're also very aware of listener reactions, and just, you know, I felt like I could be very deceptive in a way that wasn't always helpful to me, but felt kind of like, yeah, like I love that word, intoxicating, but yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking of when I was writing about stutterers being experts at speaking.
Thank you, Emma. Emma, if you would like to, there are a few comments in the chat if you want to respond or not. And we're going to move on to Patrick Campbell and his chapter, People with Stigma.
Thank you.
Patrick, I'm having a hard time hearing you. I'm not sure if everybody else is as well.
Oh no. Can
That's
you hear
better.
me okay?
Perfect.
Okay. So hello everyone. It's so great to see you all here. I thought I'd take this a slightly different route in my chapter as well.
Wait, hey, Patrick. I wonder if it's. I think when you picked up whatever you have in your hand, could that be like over your mic?
I think it might be
Yes.
over my
Okay.
mic. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Number 3, and this isn't because of stammering for once. So what I thought we'd do is try to capture some of the voices which aren't here today, and just grab one or two of the quotes I really like through the book. So I thought I'd start with Mike Oliver, who's a disability activist and campaigner, who formalized the social model in academic terms. Mike writes, I earnestly hope that people who stammer find that this social model as empowering as other impairment groups have in our quest to take our places in the world in which we live, and remove many of the barriers we all face. What I love about this quote is that Mike Oliver, as a physically impaired person, is reaching across impairment groups to people who stammer, and showing how this social model can benefit a really wide range of disabilities. And I think, to me, this quote really just serves to highlight that stammerers are not alone in our battle against shame and stigma, and that we must look to and help other people out there as well who are allies. The second quote is by Zaharia Richter, who writes, with my father, I dream of a day when all stutterers are taught that there is nothing wrong with them, and that it does not matter how long it takes you to say a word or how many misunderstandings you have in daily conversation, and to instead realize what matters is the effort you put in and the spirit in your everyday expressions. David Mitchell uses this quote in his foreword as well, but he takes out the "with my father" part. But I think that's such an important part of this piece. My dad stammers, and often stammering is something which is part of our family and part of our lives as a stammerly as well. So I really like that "with my father" part for the start of Zaharia's quote. The next one's by Ian Wilkie, and I hope he won't mind me using this one because it's quite personal. And it's, he hasn't felt so lonely since his mother died when he was a boy. So Ian's talking about how he feels after he stammered in a big encounter here, and I just think it's such a powerful but short sentence. There's so much in that sentence. And first of all, for Ian to feel safe enough to share that with other people who stammer, I think speaks a lot to how welcoming and safe our community is. But it does also show what a lonely experience stammering can be until you meet other people who stammer and start to look at stammering in a non-stigmatizing way. The last quote I just want to use is from Elizabeth Whistler, and she writes, "I know my journey has not ended, and I am eager to see where it takes me next." And I guess I want to use that one because this sort of webinar happening across the world in the States 1 year after the book is written is part of that journey, and all of us, these ideas and the book are still on a journey, and we're all part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you for sharing others' words who couldn't be here. Are there any questions or thoughts or reflections? We have a general comment from Beth in the comments, and she said, now that Joe Biden is getting folks to talk about stuttering more, I wonder if we can get him to approach his stuttering from a social model perspective. His approach is the overcoming model, and I wonder if he can evolve.
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe Biden, it's such an interesting topic, and I really want him to hopefully connect with these ideas in the stammering community, and I really hope that he gets a chance to read our book and hear some of the great people here and their ideas. But I do agree he sometimes comes from an overcome perspective, but hopefully over time he'll become more interested in these ideas and concepts.
Any other thoughts or questions? This chat it could be a book pretty much. We have such interesting things in the chat. I don't know if everybody is on their phone. I know it's hard to see the chat on your phone, but here, let me see, there's some more questions. Sure, Tracy said something interesting. She said the movement to accept stuttering as normal is a very new concept. I think for our generation, I'm speaking Patrick, our generation, you know, we've been working on it for years now, and it feels like, come on, guys, but it is a new idea. And Tracy said she's 55 and she still struggles with this idea.
Roisin, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Pam, I think that you're on mute.
Yeah, just saw that, the Zoom mute, yep. Patrick, being that you're in the medical community, do you find any pushback from medical colleagues about the social model of disability, which includes stuttering?
That's a very interesting question, Pamela. I think at work, everybody's always been quite accepting and open to my own stammering, but I'm conscious that doctors always naturally put everything in terms of the medical model gaze. And I mean, first of all, I think it's quite rare that doctors actually interact with people who stammer. I mean, that's normally something which speech and language therapists are more involved with. But certainly when we as doctors talk about things like autism and other impairments, it's nearly always from a medical model point of view. So I think the social model and neurodiversity does need to become more known and more accepted inside of medicine as a whole.
Great question, Pam. We're going to move on to Nina G. So thank you, Patrick. And then after Nina, we'll have a break. So Nina G, who is well known in our stuttering community, is going to reflect or read something from her chapter, Transforming the Stuttering Iceberg.
Thank you. Love to see everybody and love to hear so much stuttering. And I miss you all, and I want to hug you and kiss you and do all kinds of things that we can't do right now. So I hope to do that soon. So I am a stuttering dyslexic, and that's why I am so close to Kristel, who is going to do a presentation as well. So many times I think people who have multiple identities, whether it's race, whether it is culture, whether it is a queer identity, or an additional disability identity, we have to check our identities at the door when we come into a stuttering space. And I just want to acknowledge that I have one, which is dyslexia. And being a stuttering dyslexic, not really fun to read out loud. So I'm not going to do that. Plus, somebody who was on this has my book, but he gave me this Porky Pig, so it's all good. So I am going to show you a slide in the spirit of dyslexia. I'm going to show you this. Can people see it? Karen, you're showing up. Okay, good. All right. So many of us know Sheehan's iceberg, where he said that stuttering is like an iceberg. What you see and what you hear is us stuttering, but beneath that is beneath the waterline is denial, shame, anxiety, guilt, fear, hopelessness, and isolation. These are the feelings that he said are associated with the stutter, and that you have to approach these in order to work on this stutter. And for me, especially coming from this social model of disability that Joshua talked about, that I believe these things are caused by this stigma of our culture. And if we can challenge some of those stigmas, then we can start to reframe what we think of as stuttering. So it's our icebergs. If we can shift how we see the iceberg, we might see something else. And kind of like what Ron said about having positive feelings about stuttering, that denial can turn to acceptance, shame to pride, anxiety, kindness, guilt to comfort, and also to forgiveness, which I think is how I would have phrased this now. Fear to courage, hopelessness to hope, and most of all, and we are doing this right now, isolation into community. For me, as a person who stutters, finding that community has been the most important thing, and that has helped to shape all of these other things. It's been important to me to see women like Roisin and Karen embrace their stutters and to live with that. And I think especially as a woman, we are taught to make ourselves small, and stuttering will be a reinforcement of that. And how I've seen the role models, which are many of you. I mean, Anita, like we could have role models from all across the world. And those are the things that help to change my perspective. Now, I don't think that everybody needs to have this iceberg or that iceberg. And I think one of the things that we oftentimes see in this stuttering world is you have to be this way. You have to accept your stuttering all the time, every single time. It's like, you know, sometimes I just want my husband to order the pepperoni pizza, you know, like that's cool. There are some days that you don't need to be on a 100 every single time. So I encourage everybody to look at where their icebergs are now and to consider where they want their icebergs to be. With that, I'll go ahead and take questions.
Come out, wherever you are.
Okay, so there is the question of stuttering as a disability. And thank you, Hope, for asking that, and also thank you, Hope, for being one of our fluent allies, which we have so many awesome allies that are on here who are doing work that really move our community forward. The disability thing is a tough one because I think that we internalize the stigma of disability in the same way that able-bodied people do. And I don't think we've had really honest conversations, or we know history. For me, I am from the Oakland Bay Area, and I know that the disabled community took over a building in San Francisco to get the Rehabilitation Act passed. And that action helped me engage in my own civil rights as a person who stutters and a person who has dyslexia. I also know that that movement, out of that came out people like Michael Sugarman, who started the National Stuttering Project. He's also the one who has my book and who gave me that pig. But nonetheless, thank you for all the work, and we're good with the book. So I think it's important that we recognize the history there, because I think that will encourage us to see a connection. And if we can challenge, like, you know, like people who use chairs can be just as brilliant and resilient as we can be. And I think we can take some of that and we can understand it, and there should be more cross disability stuff.
Joni put a comment in the chat that I want to share because it's very nice. She said that the visual was great. My son is very stuck on the overcoming model, and this gives me a place to start and try to get the conversation going.
Yeah, no, and I think that overcoming model is just something that has been bred into us through the media, through so many, and through the therapy, that the model has been fluency and not good communication. And that's really what I think our SLPs and other kinds of helping professionals should be going toward, is good communication, because you've seen a bunch of examples of that throughout the day.
And we have Ramdeep who has a question. You can unmute and ask it.
Hi, thank you, Nina, for sharing that. It was really interesting. I'm still in the process of trying to change my perspective of the iceberg from shame to pride, and meeting the stammering community over the past few months has really started that journey for me. I wonder, in your case, was it a particular event that got you to start to change your approach from overcoming to the social model of stammering with pride? Did something particular happen, or what sort of change the iceberg in your case?
That is an excellent question. And it's such an excellent question that I wrote a book on it right here called Stutter Interrupted, the comedian who almost didn't happen. And for me, it happened twice. It's that experience happened twice that I talk about here. Once was when I found the NSP, it's the NSA was the NSP in the 90s, in the early 90s, late 80s, when I found them. And I was watching Late Night with David Letterman one night, and there was an ad for the NSP, and it frickin' changed my life. And that's why I am here now. And I started to volunteer. I started to do things within that community. And I was like, okay, I can be a teacher and I can stutter. And so it put me on that path. I went back to a conference when I was 35. And there I realized how much, like, yeah, I was fine in terms of my job, although there were some issues there too, but I wasn't fine as a person, that I hadn't internalized those things. And like, I realized how I interrupted myself, that I was holding back in conversations. I was holding back in my wishes. It's like that model. And I think somebody, Anita had talked about how her model for self-acceptance was a model for other things too. And for me, the model of not accepting was a model for everything else too. So I applied it to multiple things in relationships, and so I wasn't getting what I wanted because I interrupted my own needs, just like I self-interrupted my speech, just like other people interrupted me. And so when I came back from that conference, I realized how much space I relinquished up to other people, and made some changes in my life. One of those changes became starting my dream, my lifelong dream of being a stand-up comic, because I was kind of like, you know, my fluency's not getting any better. And also I am an activist, and I can integrate that into comedy because I know that from the comics that I love, like Chris Rock and Richard Pryor, and bringing that into the world. And so for me, community has been the biggest thing. And that's why I just want to thank everybody on here for being part of that, and for highlighting that and elevating that and creating those spaces from the days that Michael Schickerman did in the Bay Area to even Zoom now, and we are going all over the world, and really appreciate that, and love you guys.
Thank you. We're going to take a 10-minute break now, and I hope that everyone returns after the break, because we have three more speakers to hear from: Sam, Kristel, and Chris. Enjoy your break, and of course it's hard, it's impossible to get to all the questions, but I think we'll ask the speakers afterwards if they would like to make their email addresses available in case people want to email them questions as well. So I'll see you all back here in 10 minutes. Okay, and we are back, hopefully. Well, most of us are back. It's going down in the chat. This is great. Hope everybody got something to eat or drink. Let me just see if enough people are back to get started. Okay. Welcome back to part 2 of the Friends Speaker Series, Challenging Stuttering Stereotypes. We're going to launch right into our next speaker, Sam Simpson, whose chapter in the book is called Looking Back, Looking Forward.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, friends, for hosting such a fantastic celebration of the book. It's lovely being here amongst you all. So my chapter reflects on my experience and encounters, I suppose, within speech and language therapy in relation to disability theory. I first came in contact with disability theory in 1995 when I was training to be a speech and language therapist. And my chapter plots the highs and lows, I guess, of trying to engage in a broader conversation within the stammering community about different frames and alternative ways of looking at difference to the medical model. What I'm going to do now is read the final section of my chapter, which is the looking forward section, and hopefully I'll keep within 5 minutes. I do want to say my internet has been dipping in and dipping out, so I really apologise profusely if I suddenly disappear off screen, but fingers crossed, Zoom will hold in. As I survey the current landscape, it's remarkable to consider just how much momentum has been gained in recent years. The world is now populated with many more radical voices redefining the narrative around stammering in an increasing number of different sectors. Contextually, these are riding on the wave of more widespread fundamental social change. Of particular relevance is the cultural movement towards conceptualizing the world population as neurodiverse. Similarly, positive psychology and the strengths movement are cultivating foreign consciousness, openness to difference, and the celebration of otherness and unique experience. These trends all seem to be converging to create the global environmental conditions for change towards greater authenticity, pride, and respect. So looking forward, against this backdrop of profound social change, it's arguably time for speech and language therapy as a profession and stammering researchers and therapists in particular to reconsider their position and role. Central to this is the acknowledgement that, to date, the evolution of stammering therapy has been dominated by the medical model. Having shone our torch narrowly on one paradigm to define our terms of reference and scope of practice, the momentum for cultural change prescribes a professional and ethical imperative to extend the reach and consider different paradigms and their implications for the future of stammering therapy. This conversation is beginning and will naturally take us into new and unfamiliar territory. However, we risk becoming outdated if we do not consider the broader agenda for social change and what this means to the fundamentals of stammering therapy going forward. Such a voyage calls for action at many levels. It calls for all educators to integrate the diversity agenda into the speech and language therapy curriculum in order for future stammering therapists to explore the philosophical underpinnings of their role and approach. Similarly, current therapists need open forums to re-examine their underlying values, role, and scope of practice. We need more researchers willing to consider alternative conceptual frameworks to the medical model for future stammering research. For example, the social model of disability points to more widespread research into public awareness campaigns, tackling stigma and stereotyping, in addition to the development and coordination of robust information, education, and support programs in schools, universities, and places of work, as well as public services. This requires a balanced investment of resources, focusing on tackling the day-to-day barriers experienced by young people and adults who stammer, as well as neuroscientific developments and therapies for children. The social model also supports more meaningful collaboration with people who stammer to rethink the scope, focus, and role of future stammering therapy for children, young people, and adults. This involves people who stammer becoming partners in research rather than onlookers being paid lip service. We have seen tremendous advances in the fields of neuroscience and genetics in recent years, but I'm not aware of any public open debate about the broader social and ethical implications of this research. What kind of society do we ultimately want to live in? A world without stammering, or a world that understands and gains from the experience of stammering? A world that understands and gains from stammering is a world in which stammering is visible and upheld as a legitimate and valuable means of communication in its own right. Fundamental to this is representation. We need more healthcare practitioners and educators who stammer, more newsreaders and presenters, actors, artists, business leaders, politicians, and international spokespeople. I can see a transitional role for speech and language therapists in terms of challenging social and self-stigma to support people who stammer to fulfill their educational, professional, and personal dreams and potential. However, in the way that people with dialectal speech differences are no longer considered to have disordered speech and therefore need restorative speech and language therapy, I also hope for a future where stammering therapy will no longer be needed. Just as many charities now aim for extinction, effectively reaching a point where they are no longer needed, perhaps stammering therapists also need to aim for extinction. Maybe going forward, our pole star is what needs to change in order for our services to become redundant. Whilst such a world is a long road ahead of us, it is nevertheless pleasing to see that we're now definitely on the path.
Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions or thoughts?
I'd love to ask a question if I may. Hi, Sam, I really enjoyed your chapter. I'm a newly qualified speech therapist, and I found it really, really challenging and very interesting to think about how I might put these ideas into practice, like from the get-go in my career. But I've been really struggling with the limited funding that we have in speech therapy in the UK, depending on where you are in the country. And I guess I wanted to ask whether you perceive funding being a barrier to exploring some of these themes with children that, well, I'm in paediatric practice, sorry, so certainly with children, whether you see funding as a barrier to exploring some of these themes, because sometimes the way speech therapists are working, they're going into schools, they're seeing a child once for assessment, they leave recommendations and they go. And I'm finding it hard to put these sorts of ideas into practice in that sort of model of working. And I wondered whether you thought about that at all.
I mean, I think funding is always going to be an issue in terms of the scope of and the breadth of how we can work. But equally, maybe we need to be creative with the funding that we have and rethink the provision. So, you know, maybe actually rethinking that individual model and just looking, you know, I think there are some therapists in the UK that are really turning the way that they're working on its head and looking much more at, I don't know, parental workshops, I suppose, before involving the children, or looking at offering group therapy opportunities as opposed to one-to-one. So I think in many ways it's you know, I think it is reconfiguring how we work and looking at the funding we've got, but also maybe moving beyond what is available within the National Health Service. I mean, in many ways, that is medicalising stammering in and of itself, really, in terms of the context. And maybe we need to look to the charitable sector, look to education, and look at other ways of fundraising, I guess, to offer different services and ways of working. Certainly, you know, if I think in terms of my work with adults, I think getting outside of the therapy room really has been probably some of the most exciting work I've done in recent years. So getting involved in the Redefining Stammering workshop program and going into businesses really and running workshops for people who stammer, looking at the culture within the organization and looking at how that influences how stammering is seen and how they see themselves in their roles and how they can look to influence and change that. Or looking at mentoring. I've been involved in a mentoring program, looking at supporting new graduates and young people leaving school at thinking about work and how they can, I suppose, yeah, having mentoring with other people who stammer in a similar sector to really open up their eyes as to what is possible for them. And then more recently, if I think of the 50 Million Voices recent interview practice event, I mean, that was really looking at involving people in HR and recruitment who wanted to come along and learn more about stammering, as well as offering, again, people who wanted interview practice who stammered a chance to be interviewed. And it was a great day of sort of bringing these two groups of people together so that they could share their knowledge and expertise, and there was mutual learning. So I think we probably have to just be creative and think much more broadly.
That makes sense. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Sam, I just want to share one last question with you from Patrick. And he said, you've been writing on stuttering and the social model for 20 years. If you could go back and give advice to yourself when you first started out, what would it be?
That's a very good question, Patrick. What would I have said to myself? Probably to be patient. I think looking back, I really held the expectation that other professionals would be as equally interested and engaged by disability theory. And I think I struggled by the kind of silence and frustration and the length of time it's taken really to engage a more open dialogue. So I think, you know, possibly, yeah, patience, that maybe the environmental conditions just weren't right at that time. And also maybe, actually another thing I would have said to myself is I was looking to engage other practitioners in these conversations, and actually I realized that the fresh, sort of the new shoots and people certainly within the UK who were wanting to have the conversation were within the stammering community themselves, and maybe actually that would have been a better target audience back at that time.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next speaker. But Sam, that made me think of something that, you know, when you're working very hard to change a culture or start a movement, that you often can't feel where your influences are. You might feel them 5 years later or 10 years later when something pops up and you're like, I think my work back then played a part here, but you can't always know explicitly. And I'm sure that the ideas you were bringing to the table 15, 20 years ago have affected me. So thank you.
I think it's that thing, isn't it, that seeds take a long time to germinate and shoot, and yeah, appreciating that. Thank you.
So our next speaker is another good friend of mine, Kristel Kubart, and I'm sure she's a friend to a lot of people in this chat because she's one of the most friendly people I know. And she's going to speak about her chapter, It's Complicated, Cerebral Palsy and Stuttering.
Thank you, Regine. I appreciate that. I'm so excited about this conversation. You don't even know. This is just making me feel so happy. And so thank you to Friends for putting this together and for providing a platform for all the authors to talk about their amazing chapters. And I hope this conversation continues. So I've thought a lot about what I want to say in this limited time that I have. And so I'm thinking I'm going to share the first two paragraphs of my chapter and then share some of my thoughts about it. Growing up with cerebral palsy and with stuttering, I got a lot of unwanted attention. People weren't quite sure of what to make of the way that I walked or talked. I often felt like people were watching me, trying to figure me out. It's not every day you see a skinny little blonde girl walking on her tiptoes with her left foot turned in. Neither is it all that common to see the same girl completely blocking on her name, face all twisted, and no sound coming out. They didn't know what to think or how to respond. Sometimes they would stare or laugh or do a double take. Oftentimes they still do. Coming to accept and eventually take pride in my disabilities has been a long, tough journey. There is so much pressure to conform to the norm. Over the years, with help from loving and supportive people and some hard work on my part, I've grown more comfortable with my own voice and my own body. I wish that I could say that I have equal amounts of acceptance for both of my disabilities, but if I'm being honest, it has been a real struggle for me. I feel differently about each. My difficulty with accepting both of my disabilities to the fullest likely stems from the way society handles people who are different and how I have internalized those messages. So honestly, when Chris asked me to write this chapter about having both cerebral palsy and stuttering, it really started me on a journey to become more accepting and open about my cerebral palsy, which has been a pretty amazing journey for me. Honestly, the chapter, it's complicated. It's slightly less complicated now than it was at the time. And it's still an ongoing journey. But I think my journey to accept both my stuttering and my cerebral palsy is in a very big way impacted by the social model of disability. And I think understanding the social model of disability in itself was kind of a journey. And so it's really about the barriers that we experience. So there's structural barriers, environmental barriers, and attitudinal barriers. And for both of my disabilities, it's really the attitudinal barriers that have been the hardest to accept and overcome. So I thought I'd share some examples of how, like, the way society sees and treats people with disabilities can be internalized. So with my stuttering, I used to very much feel like if I stuttered, I wouldn't be accepted. People wouldn't want to hear it, or that it sounded ugly, things like that. And with my cerebral palsy, I used to and sometimes still feel things like it's ugly, the way I walk doesn't look very pretty, or if I have to use a mobility aid, like a wheelchair or something like that says something negative about me. Or if I need to take a break when I'm walking, maybe that says something bad about me. So all of those things are kind of ideas that we get from society that we then internalize. And it's sort of a journey to unlearn them and realize that just the way we are is like a beautiful thing, and we can embrace that and show that to the world. So what else did I want to say? So yeah, so the title, it's become less complicated, and I wanted to thank Chris for starting me on this journey. And I just appreciate everyone's words and kind of trying to show that there's connections between disabilities, and a lot of that has to do with shame. So I'm trying to be more of a disability rights activist, and what I'm realizing is that the most impactful thing that we could do is work on our own internalized shame. And then once you're feeling like, stuttering isn't really something to be ashamed of, to share your story. It's really the biggest thing that we could do to slowly over time change the way society views stuttering, and for me, both stuttering and cerebral palsy. So that's all I was going to say. You guys have any questions? Nina wrote one.
Nina has a question, and she's wondering if you can talk about the disability club at school that you started, and she thinks it's an amazing tool to change how both kids and schools think about disability.
Thanks, Nina. Yeah, so I work as a speech therapist. I work with people who stutter, and I also work at an elementary school in Brooklyn where I live. And there was one student in the school who wanted to talk more openly about autism. And so we actually started a club and we made it more broad to talk about disabilities in general. And we opened it up to any kid who was interested, who wanted to join and learn more. And like Nina said, it's actually grown to be a pretty special and amazing thing. I felt connected with what Sam was saying about how in schools we need more people with disabilities who may see the importance of this kind of thing. So we come together at lunchtime and we read books about kids with disabilities from their perspective, or about disability in general. And my main goal is to show them that disability is normal, that disability is a normal part of the human experience. It's very, very common, and there's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of to have a disability. So it makes it an easy place for them, if they have a disability, to share about it. And I know that for many of them, it's their first time really talking about it openly, maybe about being teased or just how they feel. And I try to be a role model for that as well. So yeah, I'd like it to be more normalized in elementary schools, and basically in the whole world, because it's pretty normal.
So I'm wondering, thinking of myself in elementary schools, a kid who stutters, I was very aware and very avoidant of any adult who would try to hone in on that in me.
Mm-hmm.
How have you approached kids to be a part of the club? Have you had any surprising reactions from the kids, either to being asked or to being involved?
It's very much up to them if they want to share or come. So many of the kids who come, they come because they know me, or their friend told them that they should come. And it's been kind of surprising to see that if I model talking very openly about my experiences and how I felt when I was a kid, they're more likely to share how they're feeling as well. But I don't directly say hey, you have this, how does that feel, because I think I'm like you, Roisin. I remember how it felt to be a kid and to be put on the spot like that, especially because I hated my stuttering. So I just try to model a different way of thinking about it, and some of the kids share about their personal experiences and some don't, but they're all still learning anyway.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to squeeze one more question because Pam has had her hand raised. Pam.
Thank you. I just have a question, Kristel. In your view, how do others accept your more visible disability versus the hidden disability of stuttering? I happen to think of stuttering as a hidden disability because you don't see it until we stutter. So do you find that people are more accepting of one versus the other?
That's such a good question. Sometimes it's hard to tell what people are thinking, really. We don't know. I do feel like I talked about in the paragraph I chose to read, people do notice it all the time. Every time I'm out walking, there's someone looking at my feet. I guess I should have explained it. So cerebral palsy is a neurological disability, but it impacts my movement. It's a physical disability, and my muscles are tight, and so it impacts the way that I walk, and my foot kind of turns in. And like Pam said, it's pretty noticeable. I actually only recently realized how noticeable it was. In my mind, I didn't know, or maybe accept how noticeable it is, and maybe that's why those stares can feel so painful. But that reminds me of something that Chris asked me when he was interviewing me for this chapter and ideas that we could write about. He asked me, is it harder to stutter than to have cerebral palsy, because cerebral palsy is so visible and there's less pressure to hide it? And I would say that there isn't less pressure to hide it. I think whatever it is that you have, if you feel shame about it, you're going to try to hide it. And so I've been working on like hiding it less from the world, but also from myself. I feel like I have memories of like seeing myself, like the reflection of myself walk, and thinking like, oh, that's not me. That's actually not how I look. And I think that we do that with stuttering too. We can sort of dissociate. Like if you really hate your stutter, you can just sort of try to ignore it. So I think it's really hard to say, Pam, what others think. I feel like I've had similar types of reactions from people. It's like surprise, curiosity, mostly stares, and people don't often feel comfortable asking, so they'll just like stare, and then when they notice that they're staring, they'll look away. And it's similar, I think, to stuttering.
I think that sometimes visible disabilities alerts an observer to turn their filter on and not laugh. But if they don't, if they're unfamiliar with stuttering, which doesn't present itself right away, I think people feel more at ease laughing, because they're not sure how to respond, but they know that you wouldn't laugh at somebody in a wheelchair. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think that the variability of stuttering also leads to that kind of reaction, because people are thrown off. They don't really understand stuttering, and so they don't even necessarily know that what's happening is stuttering, and so they might laugh. I agree that I don't feel like I've been laughed at as openly as people have laughed at my stuttering, but I have gotten lots of other hurtful kinds of reactions or treated in ways that were hurtful. But yeah, they're not like completely aligned, but it's just a similar experience, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Kristel.
You're welcome.
So we're going to move on to our final speaker. And for the people who spoke in the beginning, I'm sorry if you felt more rushed than it feels now. I think I was sort of overwhelmed by this idea of getting everyone in, and now I feel a little more relaxed. But who will have some time in the end, hopefully 15 minutes to kind of summarize and conclude. And I'm hoping that we can hear from anyone who has any more thoughts. So Chris Constantino, who is with us, is going to speak about his chapter called Stutter Naked.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to Friends for hosting all of us. This has been a really, really fun conversation, and there's not many places where you can have these kinds of conversations. And so this is, I think, a really valuable resource. And also thank you for everybody for being here on the weekend. I was in another virtual conference yesterday, and I see some of the same people in this one. And so you have dedicated your whole weekend to stuttering, and thank you for being here when you could be doing other things. I want to just introduce my chapter quickly. Something that has helped me a lot, and that I think a lot about in terms of my own speaking, but also in terms of the people I see for therapy, for stuttering therapy. I'm a speech language pathologist. and this is sort of I think my guiding principle in therapy, is that stuttering is easier when we have a reason to stutter. I think we spent so much time and effort trying not to stutter that it becomes automatic, right? It becomes automatic to try not to do it. And in order to break up those old habits of resistance and struggle, we need to find a new orientation to our stuttering. And you've heard that sort of repeated in all of these authors, all these stories of this sort of eureka moment that people have had where they're like, I don't have to respond to my stuttering like this. I don't have to respond to societal pressures like this. I can respond in an alternate way. And so instead of seeing stuttering as something to be avoided, can we see it as something to be desired? Can we enjoy it? Can we come up with reasons to stutter? I think this idea of stuttering as a gift comes up a lot, but people are almost never talking about stuttering itself as a gift, right? We're always talking about the lessons learned from living with stuttering. We're talking about the social opportunities of meeting other people who stutter, but we're not usually talking about the moment of stuttering itself, right? Can that actual moment where you're stuttering, can that be a gift? People talk about stuttering as a gift in the same way that any difficult life event can be a gift, right? We grow from it. It brings us closer to others who've had that similar experience. We learn about ourselves from it. But can the stuttering itself be a gift? Can we enjoy it? Can we find beauty in it? So I'm going to read a bit from the end of my chapter. This is from a section called Delight in Intimacy. How do we begin to see the beauty of our own stuttering? How do we construct a narrative of stuttering as delight? We could start by asking if we have experiences, because we stutter, that we would not have if we did not stutter. The answer is an obvious yes. We can easily name negative experiences: the embarrassment and frustration of not being able to express ourselves, feeling as though we chronically underachieve because of our difficulty communicating, or social and romantic isolation. Can we think of any positive experiences we have gained because we stutter? I'm not so much interested in lessons we have learned from overcoming our stutters, but in what we have gained from stuttering and continuing to stutter. The most important experience that my stuttering has fostered is intimacy. What is required for human intimacy? Whether emotional, sexual, or intellectual, intimacy requires honesty, vulnerability, and sincerity. In a word, nakedness. To be emotionally intimate, you must be willing to share your naked thoughts, feelings, and emotions with another. To be sexually intimate, you must be willing to share your naked body, uncovered and defenseless, with another. To be intellectually intimate, you must be willing to share your naked ideas, hypotheses, and insights with another. Intimacy is an act of mutual vulnerability. We make ourselves vulnerable, trusting that the other will do the same. In this mutual vulnerable state, we are able to join with the other without false fronts, pretense, or artifice. It is in this state of reciprocated naked vulnerability that we truly come to know each other. The hallmark of stuttering is a temporary inability to move forward through speech, usually described as a loss of control. When we stutter, we temporarily lose control. We are temporarily naked. This might sound horrible, like the start of a profoundly bad dream. Hear me out. Repeatedly throughout our day, we are left temporarily defenseless. We are periodically stripped naked. However, the more time we spend naked with others, the more likely we are to experience intimacy. Yes, sometimes this results in embarrassment, mocking, maybe even sunburn. But sometimes people like what they see. We want control over others' perceptions of us. We groom ourselves to look a certain way, try to say the right thing at the right times, and self-analyze rather than attend to the moment. Stuttering is a counter to all this distraction. Not only does stuttering disarm us by temporarily wrestling away control of our speech, but it also serves as a reminder to lower our shields, to pay attention to now, and to share ourselves with the person with whom we are speaking. By stuttering, we turn vapid social interactions into potentially deep and intimate and consequential ones. Lowering our guard can cause others to lower theirs. It's a signal to others that the conversational space is safe. We will not be keeping score of decorum or grading them on etiquette. We will allow stuttering to happen. If we allow stuttering to happen, we can invite others to strip and join us. Without all the distraction of fronts and facades, we increase our chances of connecting with others and of having worthwhile, meaningful conversations. The medical model would have us believe that we struggle when we stutter because we have a problem with our bodies. They don't work right. They are pathological. I'd like to offer an alternative explanation. We struggle when we stutter because we have a fear of intimacy. We do not fear intimacy because we are cowards or are deficient. We fear intimacy because we have grown up in a society that stigmatizes the nakedness of our speech. We have been taught by experience that no one wants to see us naked, that we should cover up and hide. We are taught to be embarrassed. The social model of disability allows us to understand our fear of intimacy not as pathology, but as a reasonable reaction to a hostile society. And so that's I think one way of figuring out what might be good about stuttering, right? But I think all of us have different experiences, right? And all of us have hopefully different things that we've gained from our moments of stuttering. And so something I ask everybody I work with to think about is, as you're, be mindful when you're stuttering, you know, what's happening in that moment. What are you gaining from that moment that you would be missing out on if that moment of stuttering didn't happen? And so I don't have something that can be gained by everybody, but hopefully by hearing other people's experiences, we can be more mindful to what stuttering does for us. And that's my spiel.
Thank you, Chris. And do we have any questions or any thoughts? This is our final speaker, and we have about 12 minutes left. So if anybody has any sort of overall reflective thoughts or particular questions for Chris, please share. Ron?
I think that you're on mute, Ron.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a really great 2 hours. The first thing I want to say was, where were you guys 50 years ago when I went through this? Thank you for all the authors. Christopher, thank you very much. I guess the one thing I want to, that's been in my brain listening to you, all you folks, is this thing about overcoming. When we were talking about Joe Biden a few minutes ago, about he wanted to overcome, he comes from that model of overcoming our stuttering. And I think that's where I was coming from. Not that I put any judgment on people who didn't overcome, but I thought that life would be better if they did overcome, right? And as I'm sitting here listening more and more, that's not what it is for me, right? What it is for me is I didn't overcome my stuttering. What I overcame was the shame of being myself, right? I overcame the shame that I took out of the home when I left at 22 years old. That's what I overcame. And when I overcame that, that's when my stuttering started to fade away. And it only comes up now most of the time when I publicly speak on my D's and my L's. Maybe someone can pick my brain about that one, but I mean, that's it. So I still know I'm a stutterer. So, but this has been really, excuse me. Nina mentioned a couple minutes ago that that community was really important. And the most important part for me going to my church, so to speak, every Sunday is not what I hear as much as the fellowship that I get. And that's what I'm getting here today is fellowship, right? And I'm also learning that if people are the most important thing, it's not about getting over the stammering or the stuttering or they get stuck on the word for 15 seconds or whatever it is. The most important thing is that we let go of the shame that's around that. That's what I'm hearing. And once we let go of that shame, whatever happens to the speech pattern is okay. So that's what I've taken from today. And I want to do anything I can to help because I remember what it was like when I was 22 years old and no one understood. I remember that. And so I'm glad to be part of this community. I've been a recovering alcoholic for over 30 years. And in our 12-step meetings, they say, I'm a grateful alcoholic. I've never, ever, ever said, I'm a grateful stutterer. So I'm not there yet, but just the fact that I have that thought of being a grateful stutterer, and Christopher, I'm really going to think about if I ever had any positive points of when I did stutter. That's a really good thought. So I'm going to do that. You guys have put a lot of thoughts in my brain, and I love you much because you're stutterers. So thanks for letting me in your club.
Thank you, Ron. You're already in the club, so thank you for your thoughts. Lucy has had her hand up as well.
I have a question for the SLPs who are present, who work with children. I know Kristel works in a school. Chris might work with children, I'm not sure. What reactions do you get from parents? I know when I was a brand new SLP 20 years ago, I would get really intimidated in IEP meetings and my speech would get really disfluent. And so I would be really open, stuttering openly, making eye contact. And I thought I was doing a great job. I was so proud of myself, okay? And then I would get this negative feedback. The school psychologist would tell me, you know, I got a phone call from the parent and she wants her kid switched to the other therapist in the building. She said, how can you, you know, efficiently treat her child when you stutter? Have you guys experienced this?
I'll say I certainly have. When I first started working in the public schools in Memphis, I was struggling very much with my stuttering. And IEP meetings were brutal, like brutal.
Yes.
You know, it's you, the principal, who's your boss, and the parent, right? And I could barely get a word out. And, you know, the whole time you're thinking exactly what you're saying, you know, are they going to trust me as their child's? Sorry for all of you who are not Americans with school-age children. IEP stands for Individualized Education Plan, and it's what your child gets if they have a disability, and it guarantees them services and accommodations in school. It's a federal law. It's a federal act. So they're guaranteed from the federal government certain services. And so I think I had those same fears and those same sort of negative reactions from parents. What changed is when I started seeing my stuttering as an asset to my therapeutic practice. And I started not going into those meetings like, man, I hope I don't stutter very much. More like, let me show them what I have in common with their kid. And let me show them how I'll be able to relate to their kid on a deeper level. And that helped my confidence. And I think it made the parents see something in me that they didn't see earlier, because I wasn't, what they were watching was somebody trying to hide their stuttering, right? And that doesn't inspire confidence in anybody. And so I think when I realized that my stuttering was actually beneficial to this relationship, it helped them realize it too. And since then I've gotten very positive reactions from parents.
Yeah. Well, I don't, I think what I was doing wrong at that time was I was advertising. I was going in with a really positive, great attitude, but I was not disclosing. I didn't tell them about it. Stutters, so this goes along with the disability aspect of it. Explaining to them helps them see it as more of a disability, helping them understand how it is a framework for their child, because they want their child to be cured. And we have to gently, help them understand that may not be a reality, and it's very hard.
Lucy, I think what you're saying is so smart. I also feel like when I go into an IEP meeting, like Chris said, if I could go in with the goal of show helps me connect with their child better, it always has gone well. I don't know if I've just been lucky in terms of parents, at least never openly saying that they're concerned about my stuttering. One thing I wanted to say is that it's been really interesting with this transition to right now doing speech therapy on Zoom every day when the kids are home with their parents. In the very beginning, I was really scared of parents sort of overhearing the work that we're doing together, and whether or not they would feel like speech is great, Kristel's great, speech is awesome. Thank God my kid's in speech with Kristel. And I think what's helped is for me to stay as authentic as possible, and always stuttering openly, talking openly about disability. And I don't know, it's helped me so much, honestly, to be doing this virtual learning, because I'm over that fear of parents. It used to be a big thing in my life, and now it's just so much diminished because they've heard me stutter, they've heard me work with their child, and they're very happy about the whole thing. So that's been really, really cool. One thing I do that is new is at the beginning of the year, I read this book that I found on Teachers Pay Teachers that talk about like why kids come to speech therapy, and it goes through all the different kinds of reasons. But one thing I added to the book is actually mentioning the disability. Like it might say, oh, kids come to speech because it rhymes, like they know what they want to say, but it gets stuck on the way out. And I'm like, that's called stuttering. And that's my opportunity to tell them at the very beginning, I stutter. This is what it sounds like. So I just teach them about all the different disabilities in like the super open way in the beginning. And it's been really cool. It's sort of a new thing that I think a lot of speech therapists might be scared to do, but it just creates an environment of openness and acceptance.
Yes, well, I do teletherapy now, and right off the bat, the first meeting, I talk to the kid, the parent, I tell them all about stuttering, and it's.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if you come from that place of authenticity, people pick up on that and they appreciate it. It's pretty cool.
But, parents of kids who stutter, I think, we need to include them in our message.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just know that we're running a little bit over time, and we have one more question. I believe Josh had a question. Assuming you're still there, Josh.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Cool.
Do you want me to have the final word? I feel strange about that.
Once you're done, then we'll sort of yeah.
Okay, good. Well, okay. So I mean, I still feel we're co-opting the conversation at the end. But especially since my question for Chris is like just something I've always wondered about, and I've always wanted to ask him, and now I have him, captive audience. So, okay. So I just want to ask Chris a question. Because your idea and like this chapter is like both like so like fascinating and both like at the same time. And so like from how I understand it, like one of the interesting possibilities about stuttering it is at any a moment instrumental communication can turn into something intimate. Is that right? Like there's this possibility at any moment for this eruption of stuttering into the ordinary sequence of events, right? Which is like both like interesting, but also like sorry, my question is, I guess I just want to like hear you like what you have to say about this, because like there's times when like we want our communication to be instrumental, like sometimes when I'm at the checkout line, like I wasn't looking to have my world rocked, and oftentimes like, and so it's like both like the part of like it's unwilled, which is why it's so interesting, and yet also why it's like so problematic in some ways, because like we don't like, it's like we're just to like all of a sudden be naked when we don't choose it, and it's like, so like there's like interesting like power dynamics in there too, so I'm just like curious about like on what you say about that.
I think that's absolutely true, right? That the reason why people have trite conversations is because they don't actually want to have a conversation, right? Like the reason you say when you're passing somebody, hi, how are you? And the person says good, and that's it, is because you actually didn't want to talk to each other, right? And I think in order for vulnerability to be real, right, it has to have a sense of threat, right? That there has to be a part of it that's not of your choosing. Otherwise, it's not really you showing, right? Vulnerability almost implies like a weakness in a way, right? That you can be hurt here. And so I think the idea is that if you can be open to that threat at any given time, then even if it comes at a time that you don't want, it's still increasing the opportunity for intimacy with others. I'm not saying that that's always happening at opportune moments. It's not always happening when you want it to happen, but if it did, it wouldn't be true vulnerability. You would have control over it, right? Just like anything else. And so I think in order for the thought experiment to work, it has to be inconvenient, right? Or maybe even more than inconvenient. It has to be painful sometimes.
But there has to be like some genuine risk involved. Yeah.
Yeah, risk is the right word.
Okay, thank you all so much for being here with us. For our speakers, Erin, Josh, Emma, Patrick, Nina, Sam, Kristel, and Chris. We want to thank you deeply for volunteering your time with the Friends community here. And I'm just going to kick it over to Drew, who has a few announcements about some exciting Friends events coming up that we hope you can join.
Sure. Thanks so much, Roisin, and thank you all for being here, and especially the people who spoke on this beautiful panel. It just went amazing. As to someone who's been thinking about like how it's gonna go and everything, I couldn't have ever like thought that it would be better than how this turned out. So thank you all. December, there are going to be two community events, like Chris was saying at the very end, about mindfulness. So we are going to be having a community event on mindfulness. So look out for that. And then also at the end of the month, we're going to be having a New Year's Eve party on December 30th. So not actually on New Year's Eve, mainly for like, kids who can kind of like celebrate together and not wait till midnight. So feel free to join as well if you're an adult, and we can kind of like bring in the New Year together as a community. That's it from me. Karen, do you want to like say anything?
No, thank you all so much for coming, and we hope to see you at our next event in just a few more weeks. Bye, everyone.
Everyone can unmic and say bye.
Wait, do bye,
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Who want to take a picture? Who wants to do that?
A screenshot if you guys want. Yeah.
Everybody wave.
Bye.
Take care, everybody. Be well. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Bye.
Be safe.
Thanksgiving. Thanks for tonight.
Bye. Stay safe.
Thank you. That was great.
That was great. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Sam.
Bye.
I'm gonna save the chat.
Okay, yeah, please.
that chat was also amazing, right? Like,
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah.
A really great
That's great.
chat.
Yeah.
I feel like Ann and I like missed some of it. They were like going by so fast.
Let me stop the recording as well.